Hello, the internets. I am Dan Harper of Dan Harper Photography, and we are here today because for the last couple of years I've been trying to partner with artists and for interesting collaborations to expand kind of my knowledge and just my interest in the photography and videography fields. And this is Eric Plamondon, who approached me with a really interesting project. And at first, I didn't really understand what he wanted. I thought it was a simple drone project, but in effect, it was something much more elaborate and interesting. And so you may have actually even seen it if you were driving down Main Street in February, March type time this year. But let me allow Eric, who is not just the director of Art Space, not just an actor, but a really, really interesting artist that you're going to have to take a look at on Instagram. We'll talk about that later. But let me ask Eric to kind of explain what this project was about, which is actually quite far behind us here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We're back at the starting point and the end point of what was the catalyst of this project. Nestled between the Manitoba Museum and the Centennial Concert Hall is a war monument dedicated to the Little Black Devils, which is what my people sort of baptized a group of militia that took arms and made their way to Saskatchewan to fight off the Métis Rebellion, if you will.
Right.
And it's been up there for 140 years. And as an artist who is highly active in Winnipeg, the Exchange District is supposed to be the creative campus of Winnipeg. It's where it invites artists not only to create, but also to put on display the power of art. And in this highly valued place is this war monument dedicated to people who want to stamp out what was happening at a critical point in their history. And so it's always kind of like bugged me that there wasn't a counter narrative, that there wasn't something
Absolutely.
Explain what the Métis side or the Indigenous side of this very important story was.
Yeah.
And so an opportunity sort of presented itself through the Lights On Festival, which was in its second year in 2024. Lights On, not only in the concept of bringing light in the darkest season, which is winter, but also light on stories that have either been marginalized or purposely erased. So a lot of artists that are invited into the festival are shedding light on parts of our history that are less known.
That's great.
So I kind of picked up the torch and said, I'm going to put a giant red spotlight on this thing.
And you did, yes.
Trigger a conversation of what do we know about our history? How are we rebuilding or reconstructing our history, because history is always under construction, and what do we do with these monuments that exist? Is it, we've seen certain statues of the Queen, for example, being toppled over.
And in the U.S., with George Floyd being murdered, there was a ton of that going on. I heard there was something like 80 to 100 monuments that have been taken down in the States for that, which is,
So it is a bit, and I don't think what I offered with Redaction, which is supposed to be a clever play on word on both Redaction, which means the striking out, and Red Action, as in the action taken by Indigenous people. Knowing that it was ephemeral, there isn't a definitive answer on what my statement is in terms of I want it gone, I want it erased, I want something else to envelop it. It is to hopefully push and trigger that conversation and bring it into the public space, and hopefully in a respectful way, but it's also, because it's nestled between the Manitoba Museum and the Centennial Concert Hall, I think you were talking, people were going to go see...
it was one of the plays or one of the musical performances that was here, and when I was out doing the drone footage of it, there was a couple people who came up to me and said, Are they taking this down? And I thought, that is exactly what this is about.
It's the nice trigger, and I was using codes that we know. There was scaffolding, which we know means construction is happening.
Yes.
But there was enough modifications in the sense that the construction netting was red, whereas normally
it would be green or whatever.
In Winnipeg we see less of red.
Yeah.
The construction lighting that I used was all taped red, and the light bulbs were red, so everything was going red. And so you know that, no, I don't know that this is exactly about deconstruction or constructing, but those questions were posed. And actually a lot of people's response was a bit of the, oh, you know what, I'm super glad they're reinvesting in this monument.
Yes.
And then when you see sort of the banner, and there was a banner underneath that was hand sewn using black ribbon, which is also a code that is often used, mostly red ribbon that we see on bridges and elsewhere to sort of help bring awareness to missing and murdered Aboriginal women. But that same ribbon, now black on black and with black sinew, was sort of telling you, no, there's something else happening here. And it is both a piece of public art, but it's also a piece of public protest, of sort of going, there's something about this that is jarring for a large part of the population.
Yeah. No, you know.
Well, to me too, it kind of speaks about where society is and what we value. Like the original war monument was in front of City Hall. It was a group of citizens that amassed their own funds and got it made and convinced City Hall to erect it in front of City Hall. And so it was a place of great importance at a time of great importance for both Winnipeg and Manitoba. When we reconstructed City Hall, they moved it over and nestled it beside the Manitoba Museum and Centennial Centre, which reconfirmed. Stephen Juba rededicated the monument, saying that this is still of importance and this needs to be part of our history. But I guess what I'm sort of offering in 2024 is we are at a time where there's other things of importance that need to come to light, that need to have a public space of importance, that need to be interacting with the public. What form will that take? I think that's a bit where we are in conversation, and I hope it's a public conversation. That's the whole point of doing public art. But it's also that interesting moment of it's ephemeral. It only existed for 6 weeks. So now what? And hopefully that debate is pursuing.
That's what comes from it, exactly. And I think that's the point, is artists have an amazing capability to get people talking about stuff. And when you start talking about stuff, you start figuring stuff out, and hopefully you come to some answers that, you know, people actually find positive, right? So now other than the actual in-depth, you know, information on something like this, what does it actually take to get something like this going? Because you must have to talk to a whole lot of people, but like funding even is important. You know, things like that. How do you even start approaching something like this? All the logistics around it. You know, talking even to the property owners and figuring out stuff like that, and then approaching them with that idea.
Yeah, I always find it interesting in sort of like what you're investing in when you invest in an artist. Like, I've been working in the Exchange District for a decade now. Yeah. And whenever we talk about the Exchange District being a historical district, I go, it is, but we need to go above and beyond what we know as colonial history. There's tons of history for many millennia on this territoire, on these lands. Yeah. And when people sort of go, okay, but what does decolonization mean? And what is triggering as a colonial perspective? I often point it to the war monument and go, well, here's a good example of something that exists and there's no counter narrative. So history sort of starts and stops in that stamping out of the Métis Rebellion. And so after a decade of like sort of pointing it out, I'm like, well, maybe it is onus on me to sort of prove that there is something that can be done with this. And yeah, the opportunity came through a festival that provided some limited funding. But then, yeah, there's the whole question of who owns it, who owns the monument, and who needs to sign off on it.
Who do you even talk to in order to make that happen, and are they going to be okay with it?
Yeah, and that was a complicated, so you got to kind of make sure you do your research and sort of make sure that people are in the know, but that's also an evolving thing. So I had everything sort of like green lit to make the project sort of go ahead. And we're discovering how to do things with the scaffolding company that I hired. And day 2 into it, people noticed noise was being made. And all the people who told me, yes, go ahead, were now saying, no, stop, take it down. And it's like,
that's scary.
It is scary, and it's frustrating because you're like, well, I thought this out and I went through all the proper channels. And then there was a re-engagement of what, how, why. And luckily, there's a few people in rooms that decisions are made that understood and sort of backed what was happening and said, no, this will happen.
That's good.
Which is also interesting. And I was at the Centennial concert hall, and one of those persons came up to me and said, I'm the one who said, no, we're going to let this go. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Which is also interesting there's so many conversations you're not even part of. And you don't even know what's happening. But that's also the point of public art is once I erect it, I'm no longer there. Like, I don't control the whole narrative. It's happening
not yours
in of itself.
Anymore. It becomes part of the public's.
I'll say this, which was also not expected, but while I was doing the piece, the city of Winnipeg announced that they were cutting public art funding. And so it triggered a whole conversation of why public art and why in public spaces. And I think that was a reminder of there's no barriers to public art. Everyone sees it, everyone interacts with it. Maybe because you were going to go see Romeo and Juliet, maybe because you were on your way to Nonsuch for a beer, maybe because you're on your way to City Hall to apply for a permit. But it'll capture your attention, and it'll leave an impression somehow on you, and that's the power of public art. It is to the service of the community, but it's also the potential detriment of 150 years of uniquely colonial perspective placed in public spaces of value.
Well, look, thank you, obviously, for doing this, because it is a good talking point, a good piece, very intelligent and well done. It obviously got people talking already. That's great. Thank you for collaborating with me on it. And if people want a little bit more information, if they want to, see a little bit more of your work, where can they see? I know you got a website, and then also I've seen a lot of your stuff on Instagram. Give the people that information.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what my website is, but I think it's Eric-Plamondon.com. And my Instagram handle is Plameric, so Plameric.
If you want to get a hold of me, Instagram is just at Dan Harper Photo. And again, if you want to talk to somebody about some real in-depth, intelligent, and dynamic art, get in touch with Eric, chat to him if you've got some good ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dan. And I'll plug you. Like you taught me stuff, and it's that humbling. Sometimes you don't know everything, and know what you don't know, and go seek the help, and dare ask someone. And I remember daring asking you, and you're like, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then you explained to me how drones work, and I'm like, I had no idea.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Well, and you know what? That's it. Not everybody knows everything about everything.
Yeah.
And so the more you can partner with people, and that's why I love partnering with artists. I partnered with Eric Plamondon for another one of these, and I collaborated with her to make a set of shoes. If you hadn't seen that video, it's on my YouTube channel. And it was I find it fascinating. We can learn, even if you're a plumber and a photographer, you can learn certain things. Certain things can trigger certain ideas that can be very dynamic, and we can learn from anybody.
I love that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So again, thanks very much, Eric. I appreciate that.